Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Members of council, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? I see none. So then we'll move to the approval of the council meeting minutes held November the 14th. Looking for a mover and seconder. Councillor Hammond, Councillor Dunn. Discussion on that motion. All in favor? Oh, sorry. Councillor Dunn.
Through you, Your Worship. I just want to note on page 13 of this, it said, talked about the Giving Spoon fundraiser that I talked about the last council meeting, and it's got the date of 28th, 29th, and it was December 9th and 10th that we're doing that Giving Spoon soup lunch and dinner.
Okay.
That is all. Thank you.
We'll make that correction then. Thank you. Any? Oh, okay. All right. So then, yes, going back to the mover and seconder, since there is a change, agreeable to the change in that. Okay. So then it is a motion to accept the minutes as adjusted. All in favor of that motion? Carried. Business arising out of the minutes, other than what Councillor Dunn just brought up? If not, then we'll move on to reports of staff and delegations. This evening, starting us off, is the Chamber of Commerce feasibility study results on the Greenhouse and Agri Center of Excellence, and I believe Dave Campbell is coming, Denise as well.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor and Council. The Chamber is very honored to have Denise Gannon with us tonight. We've been lucky to have her work with us, and she has a report for tonight. And of course, as I announced before, the Chamber is grateful for the support of the Council, for all they do for us. We want to reciprocate. So thank you for your continued support, and for the ones that haven't heard it from the press, this is just the beginning. We will continue on. We'll be looking for more grants next year to keep this process going. So thanks again. Denise, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dave. Good evening, Your Worship, council members, and staff. It's my pleasure to be here tonight. I promised it would be a very short presentation. I was told 5 minutes was the allotted time. I don't know if I can talk that fast, but I'll do my best. I won't do a lot of the background, since I know most of you are familiar with the prior project that led to this one. But one of the things that came out of that in terms of understanding what the key steps of this Trillium project were, the most important part was to get employer input to really help identify what the critical skill gaps were. So we undertook a series of interviews, we did a survey with employers, and we ran a couple focus groups to validate those findings as well. The second thing we tried to do with this project was to assess what the program availability was. So currently, what programs were educational institutions offering that would be addressing these skill gaps, and where were they not meeting the needs of the agribusiness sector at both the secondary and post-secondary levels. Then the third thing the study was undertaking to look at was to research various models of governance. So how might? They're throwing things at me. I promise I'm not that bad. So we wanted to research models. What might it look like in terms of the governance structure of a center if we were to put it together? What would the collaborations look like? Where would the ownership lie, and what kind of governance model might make sense? And then the last thing, of course, was to look at potential pots of money for funding. So how might we move this? We came up with the acronym ACE. It's the Agribusiness Center of Excellence. So I don't know if you like it or not, but that's the acronym we're going with. So, and then obviously the last thing we're trying to do is document the level of community support that we have, so that when we go forward to the next step, as Dave alluded, we'll be able to demonstrate that we have strong support from the employer base, strong support from various community groups. We hope good support from the council, and we would be asking perhaps also as well. We have a document that we've had various employers and community members sign, just saying that they support in principle the concept that we're working on. Because we think that will show some strength to the Trillium Foundation when we ask for the next phase of funding. So some of the things that we had identified in the previous labor market project as some challenges for the Leamington area. We know that there's tightening in the labor market. We've had a challenge with the fact that there isn't population growth, and we have some interesting demographics in this community in terms of the makeup and age of the community. We've had a challenge with the youth out migration, where we're not keeping our young and educated people in the community. We don't have as high a post-secondary completion rate as the average in the province of Ontario and the average across the country. We've had some challenges most recently with reduced levels of temporary foreign worker visas, which means there's even more gaps inside the sector, jobs that are not being filled. And then we do have some increasing level of demand for labor because there's continued growth in this sector. So all of those things coming together are really pushing us forward in terms of creating more urgency to get this issue looked at. Just some data that's in the report about the local area population decline. One of the things I mentioned in the press release was that we've expanded not just Leamington, Kingsville, but now we're looking at including the Chatham-Kent area, and that's to make a more feasible sized population base for the educational institutions if we're going to actually be able to offer diploma and degree programs in a facility located here in the Leamington area. We need a broader population base to draw from. However, both Chatham-Kent and Leamington-Kingsville have had declines in their population over the past decade, most recently a 1.26% decline in population as of the 2016 census, versus the provincial average, which saw growth of 4.5%, and the national average, which grew at 5%. So that is creating a challenge for filling the labor market needs of the employers in this sector. The other thing we mentioned was the unique makeup. We have a higher than average number of seniors in our area and a lower than average number of people in that working age population, 15 to 64. So in terms of the actual numbers, the town itself is 62.8%, 61% for the Leamington census area, which also includes Kingsville, and the national average would be 66.5%. So we're a significant amount lower in terms of the working age population that lives in our community. And again, this is contributing to that tightness in the labor market sector. Some of the opportunities that we were able to identify. Obviously, there's been a great level of community collaboration in this project and the previous one, and I think that that bodes well for moving the project forward. We were able to identify some key training gaps that needed to be addressed. The first one that came out of the original project was customer service, and the Chamber was actually able to run a program offering customer service training to local employers in 2016 and 17. Leadership was identified as a key skill gap, and we have not moved forward on that one, but there is definitely a strong need. And then the other was entrepreneurship, which was identified in that initial labor market research project that was done. So in terms of the skill gaps that the Agribusiness Center of Excellence could address, we needed to be more specific, and so that was hence the idea to do an employer survey. So on that survey, we had the steering committee, as well as Workforce Windsor Essex, a recent project that they had undertaken to look at key jobs that were in demand in the Windsor Essex area, as well as the Ontario Chamber of Commerce had done an agricultural sector paper, and there were 2 or 3 other sources that I referenced which are in the report. So out of those, we identified 14 critical jobs for the agribusiness sector locally, and we asked the following questions of employers. Are you currently hiring for this job? How many vacant positions do you have, and how many were last year? How many are you forecasting for this role in the coming year? And rate the level of difficulty in finding enough qualified applicants and in being able to hire enough qualified applicants, and that was on a Likert scale of 1 to 5. So we had 33 respondents to the survey. The breakdown in terms of mid-sized companies, which we call, that's 50 to 250 employees. They were about 37.5% of the respondents. Next was small businesses, which would be less than 50. And large and very large made up the remaining 38% at 12.5% for large, and very large is over 500 employees. That was 15%. As far as the geographic breakdown, we had 12% from Chatham-Kent, 28% from Blenheim, and 28% from the Leamington area, and unfortunately, about a third of the respondents did not answer that question appropriately, so we were not able to identify their location. So we know from who we sent it to that they're in this general area, but we don't know the actual respondents, all of those details. But we have a decent cross-section of some from Chatham-Kent, some from Blenheim, some from Leamington-Kingsville. The 14 jobs you'll see listed there, those were the ones that our steering committee and that other background research told us were the most critical for the agribusiness sector. Obviously, the entry-level role, harvester, packer, frontline operator, is the one that had the highest number of openings. Obviously, it's a volume role, so I mean that kind of makes sense. At 64% of the respondents currently having opens, and the study period was basically June through August of this year. The next highest was maintenance at 48%, 43% for growers or crop scouts, and 39% for quality. So those were sort of the top 4 positions. In terms of the difficulty of hiring and difficulty of recruiting, the same for as well as the robotics. So we did break down maintenance into millwright, electrician, maintenance technician, and automation robotics technician, when in fact in many organizations, they're one in the same. They hire one role for all of those different. Some of the larger organizations would actually have, you know, an electrician and a millwright and somebody who's doing general maintenance and a robotics person. But in many organizations, it's, you know, one person is filling all of those different roles. So definitely in terms of the skilled trades area, there's some challenges. We did look at what investment employers were making in training. The mode for the study was $25,000, with more than a third of the respondents investing $50,000 a year or more into training and development of their employees. So there is money already being spent on upskilling existing employees, and there definitely, from the interviews and focus group input, is interest and commitment from employers to continue to invest in the training of their workforce. So I don't think that we were concerned that that might have been an issue, that employers wouldn't be willing to spend money to get training for their people, but that does not appear to be the case. The focus groups were held at the very end of the project, and that was after we had done the survey and most of the interviews, so that basically we were sharing back with them the results and trying to get a sense of validation. Did we get the issues right? Does this data make sense to you? And so the focus group process was very useful. We held 2 sessions in Leamington, and we had 3 one-to-one meetings in Chatham through their economic development. Just the timing, they were right when we were finally available to go to Chatham. They were in the middle of the basically harvest, so it was not a good time for people in the agribusiness sector to come and do a focus group, but I did manage to get through Kim Cooper a number of one-to-one meetings with 2 greenhouses and 1 grower. So at least we got some input from them and got some validation back on the project from those folks. We had 3 Leamington employer reps in various one-to-ones, plus we had 4 direct reps sitting on the steering committee, and then we had the representative from the Ontario Growers Vegetable, or OGVG. So we did have a pretty good cross-section of employer input, in addition to the survey input. And we had a number of meetings with educators, service providers, community partners, various people that might have a stake in how the center would operate down the road. I think in all, more than 50 people that I've interviewed over the course of the year. And there's a listing of that at the very back appendix to the report. And we also provided them some background in the focus group session on the labor market partnership project, the original one that the District Chamber of Commerce had done about 1.5 years ago, as well as the data from this project. Okay, so the next things we talked about with the focus groups, as well as in the individual interviews, was where do you feel we would need to focus our energies in terms of the types of educational programs that this center might offer. And we definitely got strong support for some type of greenhouse growing technician program, and the little stars next to that one, and maintenance automation mean those would be programs that would actually be some type of degree or diploma credentialed program. The other programs, supervisor training, management and leadership, operator and food safety, would be other forms of current worker upskilling. And then so there may not necessarily be a diploma or degree associated with it, but it would be more in terms of just this increasing the skill base of the existing employees. A couple other things that were mentioned was second language training. Because we have a number of interesting temporary foreign workers, and we have a large base of workers in this community that speak other languages as their mother tongue, primarily Low German and Mexican. The Mexicans speaking Spanish. We thought second language training was definitely brought forward as an issue, both ways. So training those people to speak English, and then also training some of the folks that work in the sector who, such as frontline supervisors, to maybe speak a second language to improve the communication in the workforce. And secondary diploma completion was another issue that got brought up. So because we don't have as high a level of high school completion in this community as the rest of the province and the rest of the country, this could be an opportunity to help people working in that sector who didn't finish high school get that secondary credential, and potentially even then later on go on to post-secondary training if they had a level of interest. So we could see a number of uses for the center, not just delivering degree programs in greenhouse and automation and technology, but also doing a number of those things in terms of leadership training and upskilling our existing workforce. As I mentioned in the press conference, pretty much everybody wanted to come to the party, so that was a good thing. These are all of the folks that we've met with and have indicated a level of interest in partnering with us in some way to offer programs. The idea that we had is that it isn't likely going to be a satellite campus of one institution, but rather, again, the governance model would be an employer-supported center that would use various educational institutions as needed to deliver the curriculum when it was required by the business sector. So the employers would own the center, and the educational institutions would come in as partners when they were needed. And that seems to be as I said, from the steering committee and from the research I was able to do, there is a whole other document, I think it's an appendix to the report, but it's about a 35-page document. I researched all the models of various sector-based training and how it was being done across Canada and the US. So that's available if you're interested to read that. I think you just need to send an email to Wendy and she'll get you a copy. So the other thing that we talked about then in terms of the programs we would need, so clearly we need something around greenhouse technology, and we need something around the maintenance and automation piece that is, again, specific to the agribusiness sector. A lot of the other training was upskilling, and so our thought for moving forward is, as we wait for the opportunity to apply for the next round of Trillium funding, which would happen next June, to run the pilot on the greenhouse technician program. In the interim, we would look at trying to do a number of these types of things. So we have a grant application in already to do some work on that frontline picker-packer type position by doing some pre-employment training, trying to increase the skill level of the applicants for those jobs so they'd be more likely when they get the job to be able to retain it, because turnover is a huge issue in that frontline position. Diversity training, supervisor skills, some type of short course on growing technology, so not the full diploma program, but for people that are already working in the field, maybe some, we had a number of people who work with various equipments and machinery that would be willing to come in and do some technical training on how to better use the technology that they already have in their greenhouses. So that might be an opportunity. And then we had a suggestion for, they do, because of the high level of turnover with pickers and packers, that perhaps we could do a video that would create some of that basic onboarding training that they would need, Ministry of Labor, Health and Safety Awareness, basic WMIS training, some of those kinds of things, because it's a huge drain of time on the employer to have to keep doing that training over and over and over again. So that was a thought that could be a potential pilot project for the center. So given all of that, the key recommendations that are in the report are basically three things. Number one, short term, we're going to focus on a series of those small pilot programs, not related to a degree or a diploma, but more upskilling of existing workers. And we're going to find the funding in a whole bunch of different pots, basically wherever there may be money around labor market development. So that's what we're looking for that. The focus right now would probably be in that order. Actually, it's probably the pre-hiring training is already in. The supervisory skills would probably be the next thing that we would focus on, because that was probably the hugest level of demand from the employers, the area where they are having the most difficulty with existing workforce. And then the diversity training would be simply because there's some material that's been created by, actually, I believe it was the town, together with the South Essex Community Council. I think you were working on a diversity program, and so it's ready, I think, according to the woman at the South Essex Community Council, I think it's ready to go. So we might look at rolling that out in the center if we could get some support to do that. Then the next phase, recommendation number 2, is the midterm approach, which is put the funding request into the Trillium Foundation for a GROW grant to run a pilot program of the actual University of Guelph Ridgetown greenhouse technician. It's a year-and-a-half program with an internship. One of the key things we did hear from employers that most of the existing college and university programs are not specific enough to the agribusiness sector and need some type of a hands-on internship or co-op component in order to be useful to employers. So we will be looking at trying to pilot that program in conjunction with University of Guelph Ridgetown, and that would be hopefully starting in September. The short programs would probably run from December through till May or June of next year, depending on the funding. And then the last thing would be, if that pilot does get approved, we get approved the funding for that, would then to formalize the board of the Agribusiness Center of Excellence. So looking deeper into the governance model and making permanent placements on that board and creating the governance structure to set it up to go forward. Right now, we do have the 4 businesses, that Highline Mushrooms, Highberry Canco, Pure Flavor, Hot House, and Moochie Farms, that have all of those representatives that worked with us on the steering committee have volunteered to stay on and continue to work with us as we go forward with the pilot project. So we're very excited about that. And I think that was it. And that wasn't 5 minutes, and I'm really sorry. It was a lot longer, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And for those of you who are interested, there's a 35-page report and about 3 30 to 40-page appendices. You can knock yourselves out with all the information that's available.
Okay. Thank you very much, Denise. Questions? Councillor Jacobs?
Hi, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the presentation. Quite informative. I do have a couple of questions, though. You mentioned earlier that the business owners are basically responsible to provide a location or facility for training, correct?
We've actually had a couple of suggestions. So the idea would be that the center would be owned by the employers, but its physical location is still up in the air. A couple of suggestions have come forward as part of the interview process, was that there are some existing facilities in the community that could be used. For example, the South Essex Community Council and the Greater Essex County School Board both have some training classrooms with computer labs. They're willing to let us use that as a teaching facility, either in the interim or potentially permanently. My personal long-term vision for this project would be an actual greenhouse where we would be growing products and teaching in the greenhouse, very similar to the teaching winery at Niagara College. But obviously, we need to work through the baby steps of the piloting process first to test out the level of support and interest for the training that we're looking at before we would move on to those kind of bigger projects. So the facility itself at this point doesn't actually have to physically be its own location. Down the road, if we actually did get to the full operating greenhouse, there's interest from both high schools at this point. They might want to house a greenhouse and use it as a teaching facility as an adjunct to their own high schools. We've had a couple of employers offer us some land and say they'd be willing to build us a greenhouse that we could use. So, I mean, there's plenty of opportunity. But the actual physical location, we haven't gotten that far yet.
Thank you. I guess that leads into my next question here is the fact that earlier you mentioned the different teaching institutions that I guess presented some interest in this. And again, you had a number of them up on the screen. But I guess my question with this one is the fact that why are they not moving forward? They see a need. I think they see enrollment possibilities. They seem like, I guess they're looking at us to foot the bill and build it, and then they'll come and teach it. I really am lost in that particular area.
Well, I think, Mr. Jacobs, there's some validity to what you're saying. Every educational institution has to work within their own limits and their own budgets, and so they're looking for programs where they will get uptake, but they're not necessarily willing to invest up front with the hope that they will come. So if we can bring them a demonstrated demand, then they probably a little more willing to come to the table. And so it's a bit of a catch-22. So, for example, University of Guelph at Ridgetown has actually developed this program that we're interested in running. So they have done some of the upfront work, and they've tried to do an intake on their own, and they didn't get a sufficient number of students in order to make the program viable, so they weren't able to run it. So if we could bring them through the work that we've done and the network that we've built of employers, if we could bring them enough employers with some interested potential students, together we could probably make that program run and be successful both for the educational institution and for the employers. So it is, even though, yes, it's incumbent on educational institutions to try and meet the needs of the communities they serve, they have a lot of needs. And so the agribusiness sector is one of many sectors that would like to have this type of program or that type of program. So they're not necessarily going to be willing to invest in developing and running a program until we can demonstrate to them that there is a sufficient level of demand. So by working together and partnering, we're hoping we can move that process along a little more quickly. But it is a valid point. You would hope that they would recognize the need and respond, but they aren't always able to do that within the limits of their own budgets.
And the reason I guess with some of this is you take like Ridgetown as an example where they're heavy into the agricultural area, that even the research and development projects, I mean, like this is the hub, and it doesn't seem right that maybe downtown on Bay Street that they be looking at how to grow a tomato. I guess this is where it is, and I lack to see how they neglect to look at that from that point of view. And I guess that's where I'm going with all this, is the fact that it's here, the possibilities are here, the industry is growing tremendously, and unless we're able to provide that workforce, as you're saying, and I don't think it's the entry level where it's the picker. I mean, you look at the other, the possibilities on this, food safety and so on. I mean, that's the biggest thing going right now is food safety. So I'm just befuddled as to the fact that, they're not stepping up to that, or even the government is not, providing that type of initiative to these universities or colleges.
Well, I think there may be an opportunity with the recent announcement the Ontario government made about the focus it's trying to put on expanding agribusiness and expanding the production capacity of agriculture in Ontario. They have actually put some money forward. So there may be an opportunity for us to go back to that pot of money and get some funding to focus in on some of those programs that we've identified. I think the one good thing we can say is by having done the feasibility study and having the specific data with employer input and support, we'll be more likely to get funding for the ideas we put forward in conjunction with an educational partner than maybe some other industry sectors will be. So I think you're right. The timing is right. And for me, this particular community of Leamington, it is the leader in terms of the greenhouse sector. There's no question the success that's already happened in this sector, in this community. So we want to capitalize on that. We want this to become the place you go. If you're going to be in the greenhouse industry, you're going to want to come to Leamington and learn how to be in the greenhouse industry. That's the vision that we have going forward. That's what the Chamber is trying to promote in conjunction with the community, that this is the right place for that type of facility. So I think your question was exactly right. I think it is a little befuddling that it hasn't happened, but I think the opportunity is there for us to help make it happen.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Denise, fantastic report. I really enjoyed reading it this weekend. Some of the parts that really appealed to me was the education portion, 22 through 26. You've identified what the colleges can do for us, or the universities. They got a pretty detailed, account of what they're offering already. What I'm kind of looking at more is the secondary level, retaining, giving our youth of Leamington and local area options. If they're going to stick around this area, odds are it's going to be somehow related back to agriculture. And I'm hoping you'll expand on that a little more here, what we can offer. You alluded into it before, or maybe guys have already offered to build greenhouses, donate land. That really appeals to me. I'm hoping you'll expand on that more.
Okay, thank you so much. There were two really interesting projects that have happened already at the secondary level, one at Cardinal Carter and one at Leamington Secondary. So I did talk about those a little bit in the paper. So though you haven't had an opportunity yet to read the report, let me just give you a quick summary. So the pilot project at Cardinal Carter was called Farm to Table, and it was an opportunity to bring employers in to talk to students. I think they were students in a grade 10 career class and students in a grade 11 co-op program. I'm not sure exactly, two classes of students. So employers came in and talked to them about the agribusiness sector, careers that are available, a little bit of, sort of how my own career developed, and all the employers kind of did a little, story of themselves. And then we did a number of tours out to facilities. So we took them to a greenhouse, we took them to an agri-food processing facility, we took them to a series of local restaurants that focus on using, locally grown produce, we took them to a winery. So got that whole idea of sort of here's a range of interesting career options that are available from farm to table in that agribusiness sector in this community. And so we got some really good feedback from the students on, wow, I didn't know about, that I could do this, I could study science and still work in a greenhouse, or I didn't know that I could be interested in, technology and work in a greenhouse. So we did get some really good feedback. The other program, the one they're running at Leamington Secondary, is through one of the local employers, and it is about helping those people that are already working for that employer finish their post-secondary, or finish their secondary, their GED. And so this high school has put together a series of, I'm going to call it flexible training. So they have a teacher that works with these students. So they go to work and do their regular job for this greenhouse grower, let's say 8 till 4, and then they come to the high school from 4 till 8 in the evening. So the high school has a special teacher available to work with them. They work at their own pace. They do online learning as well as face-to-face with this teacher. And they're also getting co-op credits for the work that they're doing at the employer that's helping them get their secondary diploma completed. So both of those are great models of ways that we can promote the agribusiness sector to students still in the high schools, and that also for those that are working in the sector, we can help them complete their secondary diploma. And in fact, that employer is offering them a bonus if they go on to do post-secondary. He's helping to pay some of their tuition and giving them a small scholarship. So great model that perhaps other employers, if we could get that word out, might be interested in taking on. Did have some level of interest in the discussion we had with, I believe it was the Catholic Board. They're looking at potentially that idea of an academy. They had a construction academy at St. Joseph's where they're actually doing hands-on co-op programming in the construction trade. So you would maybe be doing some studying with a qualified, let's say a carpenter, as part of your high school credit. You're also getting some work experience and developing your skills and getting some hours towards, if it's a red seal trade, getting hours towards your trade qualification as well. So that kind of a model started at the secondary level could be really powerful in getting people interested in careers in the greenhouse sector, particularly the greenhouse technician, the crop scout or the grower, all of those ones that have that kind of science and technology background, that could be a great way to get those folks interested. So again, this is some of the ideas that we're trying to move forward with the educational partners.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Denise, I think we've come a long way. Back in 2007, 2008, we sat on an economic development committee who have collectively had approached the St. Clair College. They were basically not interested because of the money. That was the dollar sign stopped that dead in its tracks. And at that time, we even had a grower who was willing to do the bricks and mortar. So when I hear you tell us of all the potential partners, you've done a heck of a job, because you've got the fact that you're doing the due diligence and doing all the homework and the background and the prep work. You've got a list of potential people right there, and the road that you're on is fantastic. Exactly what Councillor Jacobs said were concerns of mine too. Why isn't this going quicker? But it seems to be there's fear in the education industry, if you will, to be leaders. They're going to wait until it's proven, and by then so many people have already missed the boat, which is too darn bad. But the fact that you've got courses in the high school shows that at least we've taken baby steps. Hopefully, because you're doing such a great job, you and the Chamber, with moving this forward, I'm expecting we will see greater results in a less amount of time. But really, you've made great inroads. We see it as a no-brainer that we should this should be the center. Ridgetown shouldn't be the center. No wonder no one's going there. This is home. This is where they would intern. This is where they would work. This is where they would have part-time jobs. That's just plain silly. Common sense doesn't seem to be a factor in some of it. So hopefully we can get this going. You can get this going even quicker. You've got the people on side. We just need that funding and obviously the pilot projects to put the money where the mouth is. So congratulations to you and to the Chamber for seeing this as a great idea, to you for facilitating it, and to the stakeholders for participating, because that's key as well. So congratulations to you, and I have faith in it that it's going to work, and we as a community will then be an example.
Absolutely. So on that note, Councillor McDonald, we'll be sending over our document that is asking for support in principal signatures, and hoping that Mr. Mayor and all of you councillors and senior staff at the municipality would be willing to put their name and signature on that, so that when we do submit that grant application next spring, we'll be able to demonstrate the level of support that we have, not just from employers, not just from community members, but also from our politicians and from the municipality that we hope this center would operate in. And we're certainly asking that also of Chatham-Kent and Blenheim and the other communities, Kingsville. So we'll make sure that that document gets directed to the right person on your staff, and we would ask that you demonstrate that support that way, because I think that will help strengthen our case.
Councillor Hammond?
Your Worship, thank you. I believe my question has already been answered, because I was going to Denise ask if you've already been able to identify any potential locations for some of these pilot programs, and Councillor Jacobs had already asked you that. And Deputy Mayor already touched on the final point that I was going to make, Denise, and in going through the report, it's very in-depth, very well done. I too want to acknowledge the fact that the Chamber has taken the initiative to see the need for this in our community, and to thank not only the steering committee, but Wendy and Dave and all of those involved for the work that's gone into this project to this point, and let's hope we can keep going. Thank you.
Councillor Dunn?
Through you, Your Worship, I want to reiterate what the other councillors and the Deputy Mayor said about great job for the information and the figures, give all the information so that we can actually get this process going into the Chamber. Dave and Wendy for an excellent job. I just wanted to also make a comment about, you were talking about language training and how, I'm sure you're aware, but the Migrant Worker Committee provides Spanish classes for employers, as well as they also have an English classes for they're starting at St. Michael's and also at Mucci for the English. So just added information.
One of the, again, part of my vision that, the Chamber and I have talked about, I would love to see a number of existing community programs perhaps potentially being housed in the ACE Center. So not necessarily us going out and creating a language training program, but finding an existing language training program and inviting them to be part of this center. We know there's, skills, leadership training happening out in various, service providers. Finding a location to bring that and bringing that program to the ACE location. So the idea is not necessarily that we're going to recreate the wheel, because we don't want to do that. The deputy mayor said the key thing is moving things along quickly. So one of our visions was looking at how we might take existing things that are being offered in the community, support for entrepreneurship, language training, diversity training. There's a number of things that are already happening, and maybe we just bring them all so that they're physically happening in one location. So that's part of the idea.
Okay, my turn. First of all, I see our representative from the Trillium Foundation still here hanging out at our council meeting, which I think is pretty cool. Thank you very much for the contribution to the Chamber of Commerce for allowing this to even happen. So thank you for that. It's funny, this whole thing is something that I had the frustrating pleasure of working on as a councillor with the former Mayor John Adams and the former Deputy Mayor, the late Rob Schmidt. We were talking on a regular basis with St. Clair College to get them to locate here, and the frustrations that you've heard from a few people here, and not understanding why isn't this happening, because we are the place to be. It really did. It all came down to the dollars and cents. If we could have supplied bricks and mortar, we'd have probably had them here by now, but we couldn't. So it's really interesting to watch you go through your statistics that you had up there, because all of those job shortages that you pointed out, we knew about back then, but thanks to this Trillium grant, you've been able to put it in hard factual comment. And that's a nice tool to have when we go back to the schools and to the government or whoever we have to say, you see, it does exist here, be here now. So again, like everyone else, as I said, congratulations to you on such an in-depth report. Out of selfishness, though, I don't see my college up there, Lambton College. Did you not go to Sarnia?
Actually, I did not, but I'm not averse to talking to
Well, the
them.
president will be very happy to hear from you. If you
Okay.
need an introduction, let me know.
I will do that. I will take you up on that kind offer.
Other than that, I think that really covers it for Erwin. Councillor Hammond?
But, Your Worship, thank you again. Just one final comment, just before they leave, because lots of times we don't get an opportunity to do this. I want to thank Wendy and all the members of the Chamber for all the work and effort you put in and the great parade you provided for us, Christmas parade for Saturday night. And thank you while you're here. I'm off topic, but I wanted to take advantage of the fact that you're here.
Mr. Campbell?
Mr. Mayor, we started tonight at 5:15, and I said, thank you for all your support. And down the road, we're going to be looking for your support, and I'm speaking for Denise. John, you have some great ideas. Why aren't they here? We have to prove that we need them here. And now people know why we hired Denise. Because I should not tell a tale. I've told the story before in case you haven't heard it, but I'm very proud of it. We had 7 people to interview, and the first 3 I was ready to go home. And when the 5th one walked in, I kicked a friend of mine under the table and said, we now have our consultant. So Denise, publicly, I want to thank you very much. Denise and I work well together. If we have a difficulty, we walk behind a corner somewhere and talk. But from 2 outsiders who really do believe, I think Denise has learned a lot about the greenhouse industry down here when she first came down from the big city of Windsor, and she's worked well. And I do want to thank you on behalf of the Chamber for, again, completely for your support, and we'll be looking for more of it down the road, and we will get this done.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. Alrighty then, let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a report regarding Township of Peely agreement. Mr. Bashar? Daher, sorry.
Mr. Mayor, member of council, the recommendation in this report that council authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into an agreement with the Peely Township for the joint enforcement of the Building Code Act for a period of 2 years, as outlined in this report. The Ontario Building Code Act delegate the enforcement of the act and the Ontario Building Code to local council to appoint chief building official and necessary inspector for the enforcement. Also, to enter into an agreement with other municipalities for providing a joint enforcement of the act and the code, also for sharing of such cost in the enforcement. The current agreement with Peely Township will expire on December 31st this year, 2017. The Township of Peely administration is requesting that Leamington continue to provide the services pursuant to an agreement for a period of 2 to 4 years. The municipality of Leamington has been providing the Township of Peely with the services for many years, but on a continuous basis since 2005. The agreement include condition for permit fees collected, travel expenses, vehicle allowance, and costs associated with professional developments, and outline the number of trips made in a calendar year. All permit application documents received and issuing of permits are being undertaken at the Leamington office. Under the financial impact, Table 1 stats shows the summary of the past 5 years, which including the total revenue we collected per years, the number of trips, a number of estimated hour of staff time, and number of permit issued. The total revenue fees collected are calculated to provide a full cost recovery for the services delivered based on an average of 2 days of work associated with each trip. Administration proposed an annual amount of $16,500 in 2018 and $17,000 in 2019, plus $2,000 per year allocated for professional development. Okay, thank you. That's my report. If you have any question.
Thank you very much. Questions from council? Councillor Jacobs?
Thank you, Worship. Bashar, how many trips does it take to complete a building permit?
How many times do you have to go to the island and back to complete one building permit? On average?
It depends on the type of permit. Mainly looking at the renovation, small addition would require at least 3 to 4 inspection. And the difficulties we facing the final inspection as we have in Leamington here to close the permit, because as most of them, they're not on the island, has to be done by special arrangement. But other than that, they need number of inspection per each.
Thank you. And the reason I'm asking that is when I look on here, it says the number of permits issued in 2017 were 9, and the number of trips were 14. And like, I don't know if there's any new builds involved in that or it's just back up, but that's less than 2 inspections per permit. That sort of perked my curiosity there.
Okay. On average, when we plan a trip, usually there's inspection schedule. Also, we have an outstanding permit. Let's go back to number of years. They're not being closed. and the inspector tried to arrange during his trip, okay, to close some of it if it's possible. Also, there's a number of complaints we receive. The inspector also look after those as well. So I think there's a little bit more work involved, not just the only issuing the permit. Okay.
And if I may, Your Worship, the last question, Bashar, is like with these visits that we're losing our staff member for 224 hours, is that impacting our ability to stay on top of the construction and everything else that's going on here without delaying our contractors and our owners of properties?
Thank you, Councilor Jacob. As you know from the report, we are very busy, okay, past year and this year as well. And then those hours basically would not cover, okay, the additional help required here. Definitely, we're looking at the extra staffing for the additional help, okay, over here. And as you see in the report, the revenue we receive are recovering our costs, so we're not subsidizing any of the work being done on the island. But definitely those couple days every 2 weeks would not gonna be sufficient to cover all the help we need here, okay, definitely.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Any other questions? Councillor Dunn.
Through you, Your Worship. Bashar, my question is just, when it comes to the inspectors, is there a rotating basis of the inspectors that go over? Or is there one standard inspector that you send over?
There's only one inspector under the agreement. The Pili Township has to appoint the inspector, okay, in order to go out on the Pili Island. Some cases, when the inspector's not available, yes, we can send the other inspector. But in general, we have one inspector dedicated for the island.
No more questions. What are council's wishes? Moved by Councillor Verbicki, support by Councillor Hammond. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Next report up is one regarding the Leamington Kinsman Recreation Complex Shirk Elevator refurbishment. No? Did I skip it? Oh, I'm sorry. The maintenance of traffic control signals and related electrical devices. So, Mr. Botham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to request council to award a maintenance contract for traffic signal controls to Ron Field and Son Electric. This past fall, we led a tender and we did receive 2 tenders for this maintenance program, and we listed those in the report, Ron Field and Son and Maple City Electric. For council's information, to date, the municipality has completed maintenance of our traffic signal system on an as-needed basis. We don't have a contract with anyone. And we've used the local contractor, Green Electric, and they have provided good service to us for the last 15 or more years. But we felt it was time to have a maintenance contract for a number of reasons. So this program was developed to meet the minimum maintenance standards set out by the province for municipal highways, specific to the maintenance of traffic control devices, and that is Ontario Regulation 23902. And we did ask the tenderers to submit prices for 4 areas: for our spring preventative maintenance program, for the fall preventative maintenance program, and hourly rates for trucks, labor, manpower, and also for some miscellaneous planned maintenance, including things like our utility locate service. We did plan that this contract would be in effect for 48 months and begin January 1st, 2018. So to facilitate awarding this program, we did create a tender that we could compare tender prices for various works. We did include estimated quantities for the various works for hours and quantities for what we thought would be a 4 years worth of work. That's why you see the price is quite high. that we listed there, over $150,000. But that does reflect mostly the work that we would see in a 4-year period, not a 1-year period. And Ron Field did submit the best pricing and did satisfy all the requirements of the tender. And also for council's information, we do own and operate 18 full intersections, signalized intersections. We have 3 full pedestrian signal systems. We'll be adding 1 more. We hope to get that in at Oakenwaggle this year, but that will be coming shortly. We also will be, through the active transportation plan and a report we brought to council earlier, be installing 8 pedestrian crossovers starting now and then through the next several months. And all of those systems will be subject to the minimum maintenance standards, so our system is growing. And historically, we've spent just around $30,000 annually on traffic signal maintenance. But for the purpose of the upcoming budget, you'll see that we are estimating that the 2017 maintenance budget would be approximately $55,000. So that is a slight increase, but we feel that with the preventative maintenance program and having the numbers in the contract for 4 years, we will have a better handle on what we will be paying. And again, those are estimated numbers. If a traffic signal goes down, we have to get a contractor out there to do the work and get them back up and running. But again, it is based on estimates, our best estimates. So we are recommending that we do move forward with a 4-year contract and that we award a contract to Ron Field and Son.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Alan, 2 things from me, I guess. I want to know, what's the harm with just continuing on as we've always done, on as needed program? You know, it was less money. I can see preventative maintenance makes sense when it comes to, you know, vehicles that work hard for us, you know, IT equipment, stuff like that. I think that makes great sense. A traffic signal, though, I didn't think required preventative maintenance. It's not one that I thought would have required this. My second thing is, did we ask the Green Electrical to get involved on this tender as well? Those are my 2 points.
Mr. Botham.
Thank you. Yes, we too did hope that Green Electric would submit. They were offered the same opportunity. They chose not to. And I would agree with you about traffic signal systems. On the surface, they don't appear to be much, but as the years go by, the technology is ever increasing. We've got more sophisticated traffic control systems, so we can't go out, my staff can't go out to the control box and make changes to signal timings and change things. And we were finding that the local electrical contractors don't have that skill set either. They would attend sites, they could push reset buttons and do other things, but if we had to do any kind of programming, we had to bring somebody in from somewhere else or bring a company like Ron Field in to do the actual programming. So the systems are more sophisticated than they used to be. So that's one thing. And again, we did offer this openly to every electrical contractor, and we did expect to see something from Green, but we didn't. But those are the reasons why we think that we need to get, well, that's one of the reasons anyway, that we think we need to get into a preventative maintenance program and to get a contractor that would have a skill set that will help us respond to questions from the public and even questions from council. You know, can we change the signal timing? Can we make modifications? With this contract, we'll have a contractor that can do that for us.
Councillor Dunn.
Through you, Your Worship. Alan, I was just curious because I noticed that a comment was, or there's a part in here regarding the hourly rate for the new company charge us. How does that compare to what our hourly rate before? But I obviously there's a higher technician involved in this situation. I'm just curious. I didn't give you an opportunity before to, when you said about an hourly rate, and I know you might not have that on hand, but how did it compare roughly?
You're correct. I don't have that information, but We had hourly rates in here for various things, for journeymen, for apprentices, for laborers. So there's a number of things, and the rates range from $40 an hour to $75 an hour, depending on what needs to get done. But I don't have an hourly rate comparison. If you like, I could get you something.
Councillor Verbicki.
With the mayor, I'm kind of happy now that this is happening, because are we going to be guaranteed that now, with the traffic study being done, that these are all going to be synchronized now? So I can drive from the TD Bank to Pulford without having to break the speed limit, because I only got 3 seconds to do it when you go through one light?
You can try to answer it, yeah.
Did I mention synchronizing? Well, those are great things that we believe we'll be able to do now with this contractor. We have an advanced green at Pulford and Erie that we haven't activated, and we'd still have to do a traffic counts and a bit of analysis there to set the time. It's certainly something we're going to look at next year. But as far as guaranteeing that you can get to from the Four Corners down to the lake, there's only one way you can do that.
Fly.
The fire department.
Now that you mention that, worthy mayor, does the fire department mess that up when they trigger it? Like, do they have to, when they have their advanced green, when they're going through, do they mess up the whole system and then somebody else has to come in now and retweak it?
The systems manage that, so it takes some time. It takes a few minutes, but the cycles, they reset themselves. That's what, and the computers and the control cabinets do all that.
So Councillor Jacobs is moving the recommendation, support by Councillor Dunn. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Now, the next report is the one regarding the Leamington Kinsman Recreation Complex Shirk Elevator refurbishment, and Mr. Barnables.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Shirk elevator cab and components are mostly original to the building. Annual certification inspections have been completed, as well as emergency repairs as required. Due to a significant amount of breakdowns over the last few years, administration investigated the existing condition and determined that a major upgrade to the elevator components was necessary. This work includes a rebuild to the interior cab and all mechanical components, which will improve the functionality and mitigate the breakdowns. Administration has completed the tender process for the Shirk elevator refurbishment project. On October 31st, 2017, the municipality posted the tender documents online. On November 16th, 2017, the municipality received 2 submissions. The summary of tenders are as follows. Otis Elevator Company, $72,125 excluding HST. Dyson Group Elevator, $89,500 excluding HST. The financial impact is the 2017 complex capital account has approved funding in the amount of $85,000 for the elevator refurbishment project. Administration are recommending that the Shirk elevator refurbishment tender be awarded to Otis Elevator Company, 536 New Bold Street, London, in the amount of $72,125 excluding HST, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the contract.
Thank you very much. Questions? Moved by Councillor Verbicki, support by Councillor Jacobs. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. And while you're at it, Mr. Bartles, the next report is Sip and Savor event.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On August 18th, 20th, 2017, the municipality held the second annual Sip and Savor experience on the waterfront lands adjacent to the Pelee Island Ferry and the promenade. The 2-day event included a marketplace, an entertainment and music stage, a fish fry, a VIP signature experience, county fair recipe contest, and a demonstration and appearance by Canadian celebrity chef Lynn Crawford. The first annual event in 2016 was disrupted by severe thunderstorms, and it was therefore difficult for administration
to do a complete and thorough assessment of the event. In 2017, weather did not play a factor for the event, and administration were able to do a more comprehensive review. In evaluating the 2017 SIP and Saver, administration met with the primary consultant, Carmina Halstead, discussed feedback received from staff involved in the organization of the event, and participants and vendors, as well as staff and the general public who were in attendance. While there are positive outcomes from the 2017 event, for example, people liked the concept and diversity of food experiences, the layout, and the entertainment, there were also some negative experiences people encountered. More specifically, issues with respect to the two new anchor events presented this year, the VIP Signature Experience and the Friday Evening Fish Fry. These can be summarized as follows. People expressed concern regarding the exclusivity of the VIP Signature event. There were many in attendance who felt they did not receive value for the cost to attend. There was not enough food provided for the signature event, and the food was not evenly distributed amongst the guests. Many have believed that the events were poorly communicated, both in the amount of publicity and in the substance of those communications. And attendance was much less than projected for both events. Overall, attendance based upon revenues indicated approximately 3,100 people attended the 2017 event. Of those that attended, 2,800 paid general admission. While these numbers could be considered low for a 2.5-day event, the majority of these people attended Friday evening and Saturday. Table 1 shows the overall financial burden for the entire event. While expenses were lower than originally projected, the cost to taxation was much higher than predicted. The primary reasons for the variance to the 2017 budget were as a result of the denial of a grant request to Celebrate Ontario totaling $50,000 that was accounted for in revenues and less than expected revenues for sponsorships. The total revenue from sponsorships was $13,250 and the amount budgeted was $30,000. Table 2 shows the overall budget for 2017 and the year-to-date revenues expenses. In 2018, administration is recommending the Sip and Savor experience be once again presented to the municipality. Administration believes that the core essence of the event, which is to celebrate Leamington's culinary diversity, has merit and therefore should be continued, but also redefined so that it's more festive and accessible to all residents of the municipality and attractive to tourists visiting the Windsor-Essex region. While planning for the 2018 event has yet to begin, administration is recommending that consideration be given to the following. Elimination of the VIP signature event and fish fry. The VIP signature event accounted for 29% of the overall expenses in 2017, just that single event. Reduction or elimination of the general admission fee to allow for greater participation. Reduction to the number of the days of the event from 2.5 to 1.5 days. Allow vendors from outside the municipality to participate. In 2017, it was noted by the consultant that while Leamington has a diversity of food experiences, many local vendors simply did not have the capacity to participate and continue their on-site operations. Place a greater emphasis on the stage entertainment. Begin the planning process for the event in January of 2018. Expand the responsibilities of the consultant to include sponsorships and promotions. These were two areas that were considered to be problematic for this year's event, and both were the responsibility of the municipality. Retain the services of an event planning consultant beginning in January 2018. This will allow for greater organization and planning and increase the potential for more sponsorship. Also, it's anticipated the tourism officer position will remain vacant until early in 2018. As far as the financial impact goes, the cost overruns for the Sip and Savor event can be absorbed from the existing surplus within tourism and economic development budgets. There will be no financial impact on the municipality in 2017. While the 2018 budget has not yet been presented to council, administration anticipates that the amounts requested for the event will be significantly reduced. Therefore, Mr. Mayor, the recommendation from the administration is that council accept the 2017 summer report for the Sip and Savor event, and that council approve the continuance of the Sip and Savor event for 2018.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Dunn.
Through you, Your Worship. First of all, how much do we actually pay for the consultant?
The consultant, I think, was in total, $32,000, 30,000 for the contract, and I think 2,000 were in travel expenses.
The other, some other questions I have for you. When in this one statement here, these were two areas that were considered to be problematic for this year's event, and both were the responsibility of the municipality. Does that mean the consultant didn't set up the actual food vendor for the signature event, or the consultant just stepped into?
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, the consultant was responsible for the getting the vendors. However, the sponsorship was the municipality's responsibility, as well as the promotion or advertising of the event. So those would be the two things that would be added to a contract, say, this year.
Mr. Neufeld has something to add to that.
Generally, those two things that were identified would normally fall to the responsibility of a consultant in this business. It was the decision of municipal representatives that the consultant would be restricted from those areas, and that municipal staff would take those on. That likely wasn't the best decision that was made, and that's why we're recommending that those would be handed over to the consultant if council agrees with proceeding with 2018. That's the normal model. For some reason, we strayed away from the normal model, so we're looking to go back to it if council approves.
Councillor Dunn?
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay, sorry, I was on a bit of a roll there, and you might have to come back to me, but a comment is that when it comes to dropping the actual amount of money for people to get in, I think that's an excellent idea. I did hear a lot of complaints regarding that for just walking in and walking around. When it comes to the actual vendors, I did hear that with the way we went about charging them so much, or the fees as well, was a little bit overwhelming. They couldn't make their money back. So opening it up a little more so, like with it comes to a lot of our vendors that we have at the marketplace, a few of them did quite well out there outside the gates. So that was another comment. So when it comes to accepting this, we are just accepting the concept, but we may have another vote on how much is being spent on it and get a further idea of where it's going.
My understanding is that if we accept the report as presented, that we're giving direction to administration to move ahead on doing a sip and save for 2018, and that they will make the changes that have been noted in this report. And at budget deliberation time, a number will be presented to us as to what they want to set aside in the tourism and economic development budget to address this.
Another question is regarding the $50,000 grant that fell through for us. Are we applying for that as well again this year? Is that on the table to be able to apply?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. We've already made an application this year for funding, but not in that amount. The application, I think that the amount we qualified this year based on budget would be about, I think it's about $25,000 is the total amount that we've made application for.
Mr. Neufeld?
With respect to the grant, it's our understanding that one of the issues with the grant proposal is that tourism is seen to be attracting people from outside the area, and I believe it's a 40-kilometer radius.
That's correct.
When we wrote our application last year, I'm not sure that was understood, or and was certainly not set up that way. So when we described the festivity that we were going to be doing, it didn't meet the basic threshold for getting a grant, which is attracting people from outside the 40-kilometer. Now that we've become better acquainted with that process, that's one of the things that is built into the changes that we are recommending for 2018.
Further? Okay. Councillor Wilkinson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Paul, this is the piece of the agenda I wrestled with the most this week, and I don't have a big warm and fuzzy regarding this one, and you can understand why. The Numbers don't lie. You know, it's disappointing. And I say that with a ton of respect to the event. It's been fantastic to watch how our own staff, the volunteers that come out to help, really everybody got behind this thing, and everybody's trying to pull this thing and make it successful. But at the same time, I ask myself, is the town buying into it? You know, this speaks volumes, the numbers, but the sponsorship portion is what I found very alarming. 11,000 in 2016 was the amount we had in sponsorship.
That's correct.
2017, 13K. I look at some of the other events we do in this town that we do so good. You know, Leamington is getting to be known for Hogs for Hospice, even though we have a hands-off approach to that. The rodeo, our community players that we have here. First of all, Sip and Savor is supposed to celebrate culinary. When you say culinary to me in Leamington, I think of produce. Number one, agriculture produce. These community players that we have in that industry, they put out $13 in one shot, you know, usually, or many, you know, to different events. They're very generous when it comes to supporting local events like this. That's alarming what I'm seeing there. I see the game plan going forward that you're pitching here, that you're going to put it onto the back of the consultant that we hire. And that we're going to add that component in on them to come up with the sponsorship, put on the festival, and do the promotion for it. I think that's a big job just in itself of that consultant, just to put on the event and the promotion part, let alone the sponsorship, which is the revenue, which is what I need to see change. You know, right now, this thing is bleeding. So that game plan that we have going forward, I don't know if it's going to work, to tell you the truth. I'm skeptical of that. So a few questions I've written down here is I'm wanting to know what we know today. You know, I'm going to go back and forth with you a little bit here. Yep. Do we have any idea if there will be a major sponsor for this coming year?
Not through you, Mr. Mayor, not right now, Councillor, in the sense that we haven't, I guess, for one thing, we're short-staffed in that area right now.
Sure.
We haven't retained the consultant yet. There are a lot of details that we haven't worked out, you know, for the coming year, even you know, how the setup will be or how it'll look. I can say that, you know, we've been sort of conservative in our approach. We're not going to account for the grant funding that we haven't received, so that won't be included in the budget coming up. We've been looking at sort of revenue sharing with regards to the sponsorship. So that sponsorship over a certain amount we would share in revenue with whoever the consultant would be. So our costs wouldn't be any more for the consultant than they were previously, even though the responsibilities of the consultant have increased. So they would have essentially some skin in the game with regards to sponsorship. So those at this stage are really only ideas, not anything that we've firmed up yet.
Okay. We're getting pretty close to, we want to get this thing started here in January 2018 is how it looks. And I thought if we did, I was hoping you'd say, yeah, we have something in mind for a major sponsor, but let's move on. You mentioned understaffed. That was my next one. Who or what department will head this up for us when it comes to the Leamington portion? I know that we're putting a lot onto this consultant, but we got to have a head person under the Leamington wing of it all. Yep. Will that be the job of the EDO? Because our tourism officer will be off at that point?
Yeah. And now our tourism officer is returning fairly early, which is in February. But in the meantime, the EDO manager will assume responsibility for overseeing the consultant in the early stages. But that would then be passed over to the tourism person. And really both would work to manage that.
And saying that, I remember when we first did this, we threw this at Kira when she first started. Basically, we hired her and we said, "Here you go," you know. And she did a fantastic job with the little bit of time she had. I think it's going to be the same thing for this new EDO. You know, we're going to be putting a big job task onto their back as well to kind of babysit this thing along. Who knows where this EDO is going to come from? Maybe they're not familiar with the area either or the players. So it's a little bit of skepticism there as well. Go ahead, Peter.
Go ahead, Peter.
Through you,
I
Mr.
want to
Mayor.
come back.
Our new economic development officer, manager, will be starting in a couple of weeks. And one of the important notes is that he has experience in tourism as well as economic development. Tourism being part of it, economic development, but he has particular experience in tourism. So we are pleased about that component. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Thank you. That helps. A few more there, Mr. Mayor. I asked myself too, what did we lose in 2016? I wanted to know those numbers, and Laura was good enough to get them back to me on short notice today. If anybody else is curious, there was 54,000 that we lost in 2016. And I'm impressed that it was only that much, you know, after losing the signature event that night. So I think that's kind of a tip of the cap to Kira. So 54,000 plus our 82,000 this year, we're up for about $137, just shy of $140,000. You know, that's where I say stop the bleeding, you know, has to be a consideration. More points I wrote down here. I see your game plan going forward. I was hoping you provide maybe some more examples of how you're going to fix it. You know, with you say make it more festive in 2018. I saw the part where we're emphasizing the music on the stage. Is there, like I thought last year was good. There was a lot of buzz in town about our celebrity chef. I thought that was one positive I heard about, or one of the positives I heard about. Can you maybe expand on that a little more for me?
Peter?
Sorry, Paul.
No problem.
I'd like to take a couple of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the celebrity chef Lynn Crawford's event was very well attended. But here's an interesting statistic that of the approximately 3,100 people who were in attendance, only $18,000 was spent on tokens. So essentially, only about $6 a person was spent. So we paid for Lynn Crawford to show up, and the people who came to enjoy the show really enjoyed it. I was one of them, but they didn't stick around and spend money towards the vendors who were there.
Right.
So that's kind of a difficult thing to comprehend. The second thing, when we talk about 54,000 and 100 and almost just shy of 140,000 lost over the last 2 years, we have to go back and remember why we started this in the first place. This wasn't an event that we had initially said, let's use this as a revenue generator. What it was intended to do was to act as a catalyst or a springboard for economic and tourism development. We are disappointed, and we as administration are disappointed as well, but I think it's important to go back and remember that holding the event where we were holding it was intended to draw people first to the waterfront, to see the kind of commitment that the council and the municipality had made in acquiring those waterfront properties. It was intended to bring, as you mentioned, the producers, especially the agricultural producers, to bring their product to the waterfront and have people take part in that. And then you talked about our local people, and you'll see in the report, I just want to point this out in the report, that it was the idea that we wanted to have our local producers provide the product and our local restaurants to fix the product in a culinary way to show off our cultural diversity. And so, of which we have plenty, but the comments back were that their operations are small. And so for them to be able to come to the waterfront to set up and provide that culinary experience from their cultural perspective, they didn't have enough staff. They'd have to close their restaurant in town in order to go to the waterfront. And that just wasn't feasible. So this is something that we've learned this year, that that concept, as well intended as it was for our local restaurants, our local producers, it isn't something that they are able to do because of their size. So I just think that it's important to recognize those points, even as we say, we too are disappointed, and we think a lot of the changes that we're suggesting can reduce the costs, increase the number of people who can come to enjoy the waterfront area. I mean, that was one of the better parts. People were really quite excited about the properties that had been acquired by the town. But I think it's important to go back and remember why we started this in the first place. The cost has been incredible. I guess we don't really look at it as lost. It's expensive in that we achieved what we wanted to by trying to get people down to the waterfront and take a shot at economic development and the development of our local restaurants. But I guess we didn't understand the implications of trying to pull that off.
Thank you. I appreciate that reminder. And you're right, that is worth something, taking us back like that, reminding the municipality why we bought up the lands down there. It's a good point. I don't know. I kicked this thing around in my head a bunch of times here this weekend. I went back to what do we do well in this town? We are getting to be, I work in Windsor, so I hear people talk about Leamington, and when they talk about Leamington, they're talking about Hogs for Hospice is really getting a lot of traction up that way at least. And that's where we're wanting to pull from. We seem to be doing that well down here. I don't know. I'm just kicking around some ideas, thinking out loud here. You know, is this something where we've got something here? Do we feel like we have something? Do we try and piggyback in on a successful event? You know, the rodeo did it as well. You know, that seems that's become a very powerful weekend in this town. You know, could it become more powerful maybe to throw it out to the Hogs for Hospice Committee? Just a little food for thought. Another thing I thought of, you know, back to the sponsorship. We just sat here as a council here about 2-3 months ago when it came to the naming rights. It was I don't know if it's right to say it. Was it a contract position? We hired a person to go around and get the naming rights sponsorship. I thought right there, here is a perfect example, a festival that's one of these big players could put their name on this Sip and Savor Festival. That'd be worth $13,500 right there, I'm sure, if not more. That's just a little food for thought here. So I think everybody knows kind of, you know, where I'm coming from, and I want to hear from the rest of council where they sit on this, you know. But that was my thoughts over the weekend regarding this. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Hammond up next.
Your Worship, thank you. To Councillor Wilkinson's points, I want to begin by saying that, you know, I think it's important that we acknowledge all the hard work that the volunteers and all of the administration has done on this, you know, over the past 2 years. The first year, the success of that was clearly controlled by the weather, which we had which were no control over. So regardless of the loss, it was out of their hands. But moving forward, we talk a number of times within this building about how busy staff is. We need to, you know, they're all work to the limit. And we hear that time and time again when it comes to different projects. And yet here we are going to go back to the staff again, and they were heavily involved in both of those Sip and Savor events down there over the past 2 seasons. I too would have a much different outlook on this had we had a major sponsor come forward tonight so we knew what we were dealing with prior to coming to this vote. I think that, again, now we're putting, you know, the cart before the horse. We're talking about an event. Now we're going to go out and see if we can get a sponsor for it. To one of Peter's points, you know, the local people, the local producers were unable to step up. I don't know why, you know, because it was done primarily to showcase their products, and whether it be the wine or the food that's produced here, but they didn't. So my thought would be this: moving forward, I think that we should take all the recommendations made by the review committee and see if there's an outside service organization or an outside group that's willing to host this event and put it on for us. You mentioned Hawks for Hospice. I would imagine they're just coming down from a high after their event, but I'm sure there are other groups out there that would do that. And I said, whereby making that suggestion, I think that, I like the concept of local food and drink. I certainly like the On 42, the Parallel 42 is the overhead name of the event. But again, I think it should be given to a service organization who has a lot of volunteers that may be able to host this event. And I hope for their sake it becomes successful.
Councillor Dunn, or Councillor Verbeke, sorry.
Through the mayor, thanks. I know Councillor Wilkinson mentioned, and I'm going to say again, how long do we continue to let this thing bleed? 1, 2, 3 strikes, we're out. I mean, you're at 140,000. Do the math. It's growing double every year. So are we going to be like 300,000 possibly next year? I'm not getting a fuzzy feeling about this unless somebody else runs it. And I don't want to hang our hat on the star, but it's there might have been differences before with opinions and everything, but people miss the Tomato Fest parade, and that's what Leamington's known for. Also, is that so? I don't know where that can go. There's rumors of other people holding Tomato Festival events to change the name. I don't know, but I'm not going to support the motion now. According to the way that even Councillor Hammond said, we need more information before we can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Dunn.
Through you, Your Worship. The money invested, I understand, like with the first year we had the storm, and I think that was a big cost to us too, because the signature event got rained out and you didn't get a chance to actually have that opportunity with the money. But we did have a sponsor somewhat, did we not, with one of the greenhouse growers, doing on the different, the food, the kids, because Hilda and I judged for different categories for the kids and different people coming in to do the different programs, and so there was a potential sponsor there. With me, it's with the Hogs for Hospice was mentioned, the traffic flow, and I understand what the town's trying to do. It's huge to try and get that traffic flow, and yes, that's what we all want. With Hogs for Hospice, they've got a lot of people coming into town and more people building, and that's what we're trying to do here as well. And I like the concept of being able to drop the fees, better advertisement to get people out, and opening it up to everybody and anything without the costs, so that they get the vendors here. But that being said, with it, like you said, there was a few improvements that could be made over this past year. My concern is the amount of money going out, and like what kind of money are we talking about? I would be a little bit more comfortable if I had a bit of a plan up front to vote on this, so I know what we're talking, what type of budget we're talking at this year coming up. That would make me feel more comfortable with this. That's about it, I think.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some concerns that I'd like to voice, I guess, a little bit like Councillor Wilkinson, just to put them out there. I hesitate, though, at the beginning when I hear that most of my colleagues are for pulling the plug, if I think somebody said. My response to that is I look around the county. LaSalle has a corn festival. Amherstburg has a rib fest. No, Tecumseh. Tecumseh has a corn festival. Amherstburg has a rib fest, and they used to have that wine fest, and they'd still have it. Huge success if it wasn't for the accident and the lawsuit that came out of that. LaSalle does the strawberry festival. How can we not pull something like this off? I mean, it should be something that is possible to do. We're not inventing the wheel. We've got other models to look at and learn from, other successful models. So to throw in the towel at this point in time, even though I understand that the financial loss is large, I still think to give up now, when we've already invested money for 2 years, I would like to see us try it for one more to see if we can pull this out of a tight hole, if you will. But then I have concerns with dumbing it down, which is essentially what we're doing. We're going to dumb it down, price-wise. We're calling it Sip and Savor, Celebrate Culinary, and then in the report it says, put the emphasis on entertainment. So now, we're shifting the focus onto something entirely different. I'm just telling you all the concerns that I have going on in my head. And then I'm thinking, we got that amphitheater. Maybe we should just scrub the whole idea of sip and savor. Do something based on the amphitheater. If we're going to put the emphasis on entertainment, scrap that and showcase the amphitheater, which nobody else in the county's got. So do you see where I'm going? I got all these things bouncing around in my head. And yet I hate to say, we're not going to do it anymore. I have huge respect for those tomato festival people all these years. Yeah, they had a loss. They didn't have a loss like this. Of course, it was a mishmash. It was a mixed bag of vendors of all kinds of crappy stuff. And it totally lost the tomato focus. Like, you can say all you want, Larry, about keeping that tomato. It didn't have any tomato focus. At the end of it, there was nothing except the tomato stomping. There was nothing featuring tomatoes. It was just a carnival almost. So to worry about calling it a tomato festival, that doesn't even enter into it anymore, because I think we lost that years ago. But to me, I want to have something. I want it to be a success. I think we can make it a success, but we need to get our thoughts in line as to what we're going to do. Are we going to spend any money? Because if we're going to cheap out, then forget it. We might as well forget it. Because a cheap event isn't worth anything. People aren't stupid. They're going to catch on when it's a cheap event. So we need to make up our minds. If we're going to do it, I think we're going to need to put some skin in the game, as Paul said. I think we're going to need to do more than just half. But if we're not willing to call it sip and savor, then we need to do something entirely different. And quite frankly, the reason, what you said, Bill, and I realize I'm jumping all over it, what you said about when Sunset sponsored it, man, oh man, they put money into advertising and marketing. We didn't touch that. If we wanted to get the word out, we didn't have people that wanted to participate in that cooking contest. Remember, it was recipe at the beginning? They had to change it. It's because those people had all these ideas and money to throw into the marketing. That's why that tent was so full of people when we judged. So there again, that goes to show you, if you're going to do it up and you're going to do it up right, you need to throw money at it. You can't cheap out on it. And then at the end of the day, quite frankly, and I don't know who's going to be insulted. I'm sure somebody's going to be insulted. But to my way of thinking, at the end of the day, there were too many chiefs and not enough Indians. Lynn Crawford had no idea what was expected of her. Not a clue. Because I spent the afternoon with her, and then we took her there to dinner. She didn't know that people were wanting to meet up with her. She could have brought her book and signed a bunch of books. Nobody did it. There wasn't a table for her. There was nobody. Me, I didn't know. I entertained it at my house. Nobody told me to do anything else. Had they told me, I would have done something. That there weren't enough people. There wasn't one person. I shouldn't say there weren't enough. There needed to be one person in charge of everything. Yeah, and I saw that in the afternoon. I kept saying, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? And they'd send me here, and they'd send me there, and they'd send me hither and yon. And like at the end of the day, honestly, I didn't do much. I entertained Lynn Crawford, which, let me tell you, was the best experience of my life. I will never forget it as long as I live. But really, we need to get our act together. We need to decide if we're going to do this. I don't think we should cheap it out. Because I'll tell you, if we cheap it out, I'm not voting for it. I'm not. We need to decide, is it culinary or is it not culinary? Is it going to be music or entertainment, or is it not going to be entertainment? I think we've got a whole lot of things to discuss, and honestly, Paul, I would like to know too what kind of dollars we're talking. Because like I said, if it's cheap, I ain't in the game. So I know I've thrown a whole lot of stuff at you, and it's not very, you know, I like to be linear in my thinking. This isn't linear thinking, but I think this needs, we need more here. I'm not prepared to say, yeah, let's go forward and not know what kind of money. I'm not prepared to say, oh, let's call it entertainment, and yet we're still calling it sip and savor. So I need more answers.
Okay, Mr. Neufeld?
Well, I think I can give you a few of those answers. The idea of, in the report where it says a greater focus on the music, is to attract people to come. The culinary experience is still going to be there, and we are hoping that the discussion, let me back up. The discussion that we had at the senior management table was what will attract people to come? Would it be the culinary experience or would it be the music? What we were thinking is that if we focus on the music, that will get people to at least show up, and then we can get them to be involved in the culinary experience. Whereas we are concerned that if we advertise it as a culinary experience, that people aren't going to, the same volume of people won't show up as they would for music. That was the thought. It isn't really that it's becoming a music event over top of the culinary. It's that we wanted to get the entertainment to draw people in. We too, as senior management, we also talked about whether or not we should be holding this event at Seacliff Park and utilizing the new amphitheater. But one of the things that we came back with is that our new pedestrian pier, which is adjacent to the location of the Sip and Savor event, will be open by then. And again, it's another opportunity to show a new feature in Leamington to people from outside the community. And therein lies one of the biggest differences, that our focus, we will be looking more towards bringing vendors from outside of the community, as well as advertising outside of the community. I don't know that we are interested in cheaping out either, because I would agree with you, Deputy Mayor, that to make it less of an experience would be to go the wrong way. However, those, like I said, I think we can offer those that explanation with respect to the money. It's a matter of 2 weeks. I think we're in budgets. We can present that then. Or we can even try and carve this out yet this evening to give you an indication. Laura is indicating that, you know, our budgets are ready to bring to you, so we know what that's going to be. So I think that's all I was trying to say, is that the music is to be the draw so that we can get people involved in the culinary experience. We too thought of we thought of the amphitheater, but you know, with our new pedestrian pier, that's another feature that we'd like to show off. And Laura, do you have, through you, Mr. Mayor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have presented, or what is included in the upcoming budget is a very conservative estimate on our revenues, just because we wanted to make sure that this was a real practical number and we could achieve it certainly before council. So our revenues that we've included in the draft 2018 budget is about $25,000. And that's $15,000 in sponsorship revenue, again, very conservative, and $10,000 in token sales, which is about half of what we received this past year. In our conversation at senior management, it was discussed taking a look in 2017, we had a different model that took a portion of the token sales from the vendor. So we were going to look at adjusting that on a go forward. So we've brought down that revenue source. In for the expense side of it, total expenses are just over 100,000. That includes admin person, or sorry, the consultant, thank you, the consultant to run the festivities, of course, all the other entertainment, it's about $9,000, and all the other advertising and promotions and the event rentals. Of course, the cost of the tents are very expensive, etc. So the net demand on taxation that's currently in the proposed 2018 budget is about $76,000.
Councillor Hammond?
Your Worship, thank you again. I think that one thing that we've quickly discovered here, I mean, dialogue is good, and that's what this is about. We've already realized that we've all got some of the same questions. As Deputy Mayor pointed out, you know, about, and I thought too about moving it to a different location, because we've got a lot of money wrapped up in that new amphitheater, and when I read the emphasis on entertainment, I thought as well, why not go down there? And to Peter's point, now that with the dock being open, it makes sense, and we want to show people and showcase that waterfront that we've purchased. That comes with a cost as well. I mean, there's costs involved there that we don't see in the report with respect to hydro service being brought to that vacant piece of property. Hugely expensive. Water being brought there, water testing need to be done, which is done by our municipal staff to make sure that the water is clean and ready for people to drink. So it's not just having it there without some kind of paying the price for doing that. And I think that based on the questions and the concerns we've raised, that I think it's premature to vote on this. I think that if we had more definitive answers and some things, I understand the urgency, we want to get it running up in January, but I don't think we want to jump off the dock until we know really what we're facing. That's about the last I'm going to say on it.
Okay, Councillor Dunn?
Through you, Your Worship. Laura, you spoke to 9,000 for entertainment this year. What was spent last year? For the entertainment, is that what it said?
So the total, through you, Mr. Mayor, the total spent was 32,000. That would include Chef Lynn's costs as well. So that has been dropped down for the 2018 budget, and not anticipating having that type of an act, if I can say that.
With the also with the thought that Deputy Mayor has said about the theater, you know, when we had the events down there, everybody sitting on that hill says, "Wow, what a view!" And I get where you want to, but it seems to be such a tight space at times. But I do like the thought of the actual pier. And are you thinking now, with thoughts on that, are you thinking that we'd have entertainment on the pier or vendors along the pier, so it's going to open up the whole process and give us a little more room? Then the consultant this year, I did mention about the food issue. Now with that, that's not going to be a part of it anymore because it's not going to be a signature event. But when it comes to the food, when it came to the different vendors, some of them had said to me about paying a certain amount of money up front and then a percentage of their sales. We are trying to cut out the costs for people to come down to draw in more people. Would we do the same thing for the local vendors, especially if they're paying taxes and have a restaurant uptown, and they might have to hire somebody to run a little event down there to bring focus on their food that they can offer? Would that be something else we could consider? Anyways, there's a lot of stuff. I'm sorry.
Yep, no worries.
Yeah, some of the things you're talking about are things that we're looking at. However, with regards to, we did budget an amount for tokens, but we may change the format or look at different options with regards to the format versus tokens, just simply charging, you know, we cast a wider net for vendors, and then charge maybe perhaps a flat rate for vendors to set up there versus being involved in tracking tokens and revenue sharing and these. So we would make it simpler. I think obviously we would look to local vendors first, you know, to participate. However, we would just, you know, we would look outside for more. I think important, the budget, to go to the deputy mayor's comments, the budget is smaller, but some of the events that we put off this year were costly. The signature event was 30% of the overall budget, and that was a significant amount. If you remove some of the infrastructure and things that you need and basically make it simpler, you can reduce a lot of those costs that were there. So, the budget, while smaller, reflects that amount is being removed, which again was significant. So, thank you.
And I'm just going to jump in before I go to Councillor Jacobs too. The one thing I think we all need to remember is that our staff has been working on our budgets that we can deliberate on in a couple of weeks and not really focusing on this event. And as was mentioned, Kira will be coming back in February-ish. So she'll be back and already have knowledge of this event. I mean, there's just so much up in the air. So I agree with you. It's a little bit hard for us to make a decision tonight on this. So what I might suggest is that there are two parts in this recommendation that we could certainly vote on. Number one, which is accepting the 2017 summary report, and consider delaying part two until maybe we get into budget deliberations, really. I would suggest, well, I'm not looking for a mover and seconder just yet because I don't think we're done talking. So Councillor Jacobs up next.
Thank you, Worship. I sat here pretty quiet listening to all this, and I wonder where we're going. And, if you look at it from a business point of view and you see a deficit of $140,000, you think we're bleeding to death, and, let's put a cap on it. As it stands now, so much more has been transpired in the discussions that's taken place here. The fact that you're incorporating the dock as a showcase, we're looking at our waterfront, we're looking between our auditoriums and so forth. It's a great venue and it's a great area to put in there. But I have great difficulty in, I guess throwing good money after bad, in a sense that nothing really has come forward what we expect. I don't think the numbers were there that we're looking for to showcase the event. I know 42nd became a big thing across the entire county. Weather again plays on everything. Doesn't matter what you want to do. You have a backyard picnic or a full-blown event. Mother Nature's the one that's really going to control in the end. As it stands right now, I like your comments, Your Worship. In respect, maybe we could accept one part of this report and hold off the other, because as it stands now, looking at these numbers and I guess the gray area surrounding this whole thing as far as what's going on, who's going to present it, and which direction we're going to take. And I would move in that direction that you're recommending, because as it stands now, I definitely would vote against this Sip and Savor project due to a number of reasons. But as your recommendation is coming forward, that may change my mind going down the road here. Okay. And if it looks a little more positive in specific areas, and maybe we'll give it another shot. But
okay. Is there further discussion, Deputy Mayor?
I have two comments, and first to Mr. Neufeld's. We figure we'll sell it as a entertainment because we think that people aren't totally buying into the culinary. Well, if you can't sell it as culinary, we might as well give up that ship, quite frankly. We can make it something else. We can still have food trucks, et cetera, but why bill it as culinary if that isn't going to be the emphasis? And then, you know what? It made me think, Councillor Jacobs, when you just said right now, and I'm not pointing my finger, no, this is really good.
That's a pen.
When you said weather will impact it, you know what? That's a chance we're going to take all summer long with this amphitheater. It could rain. We could book who knows who. We've got to think of some kind of a band that's still
Guess who?
around. Yeah. Yeah. John Tesh. If we
AC/DC.
I'm just saying, if we booked something like, AC/DC, and then it rained, you're still paying.
Absolutely.
So we're going to have to get, once you get into this type of venture, this is going to be a chance we take every time.
Yep.
So anyway, I really think we need to discuss this further, because if we're not going to use it as culinary, maybe our area isn't going to be up for this. Maybe, like you said earlier, Councillor Wilkinson, there's not a lot of buy-in. Maybe that's just going to be, that's the profile of our community. They don't buy into that, but they'll buy into Hogs for Hospice, and they may buy into every concert that we could ever possibly have at the amphitheater, and maybe we should go from there. And have food trucks or whatever as an add-on, but forget the culinary aspect. So anyway, like you said, you just wanted more thoughts.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to speak
Yeah,
yet,
okay.
so. Before you guys start making motions and cutting me off like usual. No, I know.
One quick
Councillor.
response, Your Worship, to the Deputy Mayor. You're absolutely right. I think maybe it's the title that we've put on it, Sip and Savor. As you say, if you say, oh, who's coming to town, it'll start a rumble now, and it'll be, almost province-wide, technically speaking. When you say sip and savor, maybe that's not someone's thing. Maybe I just don't want to go down there and have a glass of wine and, eat a taco or the hell they're, sorry, whatever we're presenting. But, maybe that's it too. Maybe we need to have a change, to change the brand.
Okay. So, I mean, there's just so many different, yeah, really, it won't even take me that long. The original intent, as we all know, the original intent of this whole thing was to showcase what Leamington has to offer and really get this going as a startup venture to then turn over to a local group to take over. And so that part of it, Councillor Hammond, I still agree with. And personally, I still want to do this for another year to see what's going to happen. But I would ask those local groups, whether it's the Rotary, the Kinsmen, whoever it might be, to get heavily connected in the 2018 operation so that they can see what needs to be done, or they can pick out the shortfallings or whatever. So I think that's a great idea to have that happen. And when I look at the money we've spent on this, and not lost, but spent on it, year one to me, I know I wasn't here because I was up north with my wife. We had the same storm hit us there as you had hit down here. But if my recollection is clear, there was a great deal of excitement over year number one, and the sponsorships were there, and the people were there, and then the weather came in and crushed us. So to me, year one is something that I just kind of take out of the focus, and I don't think we would have had that expense had we as council not sat up here and decided it would be more fair to refund people their money. So that number may have been a lot smaller had we not done that. And that touches on the weather comment. We wouldn't be the only ones relying on weather. I mean, I've been at the Wine Fest in Amherstburg when it's been pouring down rain. People we're just crazy enough to stand in the rain, walk around the mud up to our ankles anyway. That's right, we aren't smart enough to know better. But that's the risk everybody takes with all of our festivals, right? So it is something we have to consider. Year two, I sat at the same table with our CAO and his wife and my wife. We each bought our tickets to be in the VIP section. I got one cracker with some pulled pork on it and one stick with 3 little pieces of chicken on it, because we kept making sure that any food that actually ever made it towards our table went to our visitors behind us, who were American boaters who had come to this event specifically. And as we have discussed, there were other tables that were probably more than happy with everything they got for this whole thing, and then there were the rest of us. So as the report shows out, there were a lot of balls dropped, let's say, for all the juggling that goes on in an organizing event of this style. And I think the fault lays where the fault lays, and it's over and done. We've learned from those mistakes. Really, we've only done this for 1 year, and I'm not ready to give up on it yet, because I think Leamington is a culinary place to be. I think we have more food here than anybody else in the county. So I still think it's a good sip and savor is the title for us to go forward with, and we just have to organize it accordingly. And again, I go back to the fact that, you know what, staff hasn't had even a chance, I don't think, to look at what the plan is for 2018. And when we get our new EDO back or started, maybe that's when all of this planning happens, and they come back hopefully in 2 weeks at budget deliberations and show us in black and white what we're looking at, what we're committing to, and what the risks are. And maybe we make a better decision at that time. But I like Deputy Mayor how you started off. You didn't want to throw in the towel. I don't want to throw in the towel. This is way too soon. Year one, really. So I'm still okay with it, but it is a council decision, and I don't have a problem with that. So that's all I'm going to say about it, and I will come back to you, all of you, and Mr. Neufeld.
I have one other comment that I want to make sure gets recognized. The most disappointing part about all of this are the people who show up to this event, the people who showed up to the event and were disappointed, are generally the people who support the events in our community. And it leaves a really bad taste in their mouth and in mine that we so disappointed the people who generally are the ones who show up to these events. I mean, there are lots of people who will point out the faults of these events, but I didn't see them attend. I didn't see them buy tickets. So I think that I wanted to at least publicly acknowledge the people who did show up. I think that if they, with the acknowledgement that we're trying one more time, I think people will show up one more time, because that's just the nature of the kinds of people who are showing up for this event. They are loyal, strong Leamington supporters. I have personally spoken with a number of them and acknowledged our disappointment, both my personal disappointment and the disappointment on behalf of the municipality. But I think that they would show up at least one more year. That being said, I think it's also important to acknowledge that administration is, we say it often, we're in the hands of council on this. We're not arguing one way or the other. We look to council for some direction, but I will say this, that administration feels quite strongly that giving the responsibility over to a consultant who is experienced in this, and not taking away some of the responsibilities from her, whether it was by design or by ego, I'm not sure exactly, but giving her giving the consultant the responsibility of making this this event work, I think has great merit. When we spoke with her, we had a senior management meeting and invited the consultant to attend to answer questions for us. One of the questions I asked her, I said, do you think that there is an event here to be had? And her response was absolutely yes, that the location is second to none, that there is no other location like the one that we have. And perhaps it's just that the municipality is involved in something that we don't normally do. We do roads and bridges and construction and water and pollution control. We don't generally do events. But in this case, that's why we need to have a consultant to give it a try one more time, showcasing our waterfront. But I guess my point is, we have loyal people who I think will come back one more time if there's value to it. But I also wanted to point out that administration isn't at odds with council on this, and I don't think council is at odds with administration. We're trying something new, and for all of the new things that we have tried in the last 3.5 years, we've been very successful in a lot of them. Every so often, one's going to come along that kind of kicks us in the shins. Of course, we are in council's hands, and we look forward to your direction.
Councillor Verbeke. Okay. He was going to make a comment, but now not. So, okay. So I think really we should move ahead with this and look at recommendation number 1, I don't think any of you are going to object to moving to receive the report. So moved by Councillor Dunn and seconded by Councillor Hammond. Discussion on that motion. All in favor? And that's carried. So number 2, I will look to admin. We don't have to vote on that? Okay. But just so I know, and so we know, I mean, this will still be coming to us at budget deliberation time. And if we're fortunate, we might have a little bit more information on what is being proposed. So, Mr. Neufeld.
We will endeavor to get whatever information that we can. Part of the reason why we had number 2, and I support what council has done here tonight. Part of why we were looking for permission to move forward on the number 2 part is because we wanted to be able to speak with the consultant. It's kind of difficult to ask the consultant to, help us prepare this without having a contract with them, right? But we will do what we can to get what information that we can for budget time. At least we hope to have enough information to make council comfortable in making the decision that they're going to make at that time.
Yep. Deputy Mayor?
I would suggest that we block off a substantial amount of time to have this discussion. I don't like it when there's the fire chief and the police chief, or not police chief, but whoever, sitting and waiting to have their budget presented next, and we get mired down in something like this. If you can make it so that it's at a point in time where no one is sitting and waiting for our decision, because I think this will still take a fair bit of discussion.
I think it's kind of nice when we make some of the department reps sit there and wait. No, I just kidding. Councillor Jacobs. Actually, I got to go to Councillor Verbeke first.
Where the mayor, my question that I didn't want to throw off there, Peter mentioned the consultant. This consultant's working for free now that we have hired? I mean, you're saying we got to give her direction, so why can't she just come with us and tell us, since we're paying her, what her visions are, and then we can move, just like every other consultant that we have hired here, and then we can move on their recommendations. We can't say, yeah, go ahead and do it and tell us what you got. Tell us what you got first, then we'll see if we can do it. I mean, we're going backwards again that way.
No, it's a valid question. In part, we have engaged this consultant to write the grant application because that is time sensitive. She has the knowledge about what will of writing a successful grant application. But perhaps we can, rather than asking her to come here, maybe we can ask her for a general outline of how she would proceed so that council will feel comfortable. I think Paul Barnable might have something to add.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I've received a proposal from her. It's only this week that I've been speaking with her about 2018. We did engage her, as Peter said, with regards to the grant application, because the deadline for that application was November 9th. So we had to get something in. So we dealt with that as a separate small invoice. With regards to the contract, again, I have a proposal from her, and we're looking at a different type of arrangement than we had previously. The base cost may be the same, but there would be more incentive for her with regards to any increases we could get in sponsorship. As you mentioned, Councillor Wilkinson, a major sponsor, anything that adds to our sponsorship, if she can find a sponsor, a major sponsor, would go. There's a portion that she would retain, and then beyond that, we would share in the sponsorship. Is the arrangement I have now, without getting into detail with it, but it is different than it was last year.
Councillor Jacobs.
Thank you, Worship. I just wondered, when this does come before us, if there could be some indication of what the venue will somewhat look like. As we mentioned earlier, there's so many ways to go with this, whether it's a culinary thing or it's going to be, some exotic dance group or, not that exotic, Larry, but, I guess we're going with this is, are we going to have something maybe on the dock? Maybe we're going to have something over here, just to give us a broad idea what's going forward, so that we know we are going to be what we're looking at in the end here?
Yeah, I think that's what Mr. Barnables is saying, is that we'll try to do with this consultant, who has already helped us write the grant, is that maybe we can just get a general overview of what she's proposing, as Mr. Councilor Verbeke was asking. So, okay. So, we moved and seconded the item number 1, and I've been told we don't need to worry about item number 2. So we'll simply move on to the next report, which is the 2018 interim tax levy bylaw. Mr. Roach, sorry. Yes.
I didn't
I'm
want
just
to speak
trying
out of turn.
Scroll down. Yeah.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the Municipal Act provides that the Council of a Municipality may pass a bylaw to levy an interim tax based on the latest property assessment rule. The amount of the interim tax is not to exceed 50% of the total taxes from the previous year. The calculation of the interim tax levy includes the municipal levy, the county levy, the school board levy, BIA, uptown parking, as well as the garbage levy. 2 installment due dates are recommended for the 2018 interim tax levy, which are Wednesday, February 14th and Wednesday, April 18th. In accordance with policy, the municipality provides 2 grace days to allow for late payments without penalty on Thursday and Friday each of these due dates, after each of these due dates. Penalty and interest remains consistent with practice and is in accordance to the 2018 fees bylaw. So the purpose of the interim tax bylaw is to allow for administration to manage the municipal cash flow position effectively and to ensure timely collection of the amounts owing to the municipality. So the recommendation before council tonight is that a bylaw to provide for the 2018 interim tax levy in the municipality of Leamington be presented to council for consideration.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments? Councillor Jacobs?
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick question, if I may, Laura. Like looking at the penalties and interest at, like for 2017 as November is 414,000. That's a lot of money. What does that encompass? I mean, like penalties and interest. Is this non-payment of taxes, interest on those taxes? Are we that much in arrears in tax collections?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that's exactly what that is, Councillor. That is late penalties and interest on outstanding debt. So we run that, we run penalty and interest at the beginning of every month, and that is our amount that's outstanding. I will remind council that we do have a tax sale provision, so if resident or property owners are in default of payment for more than 3 years, we will proceed through tax sale.
So these entire amounts are all recoverable, in other words, correct? Or close to it?
It's what we have recovered, right? The 414,
The
600?
414 is what we have recognized as interest and penalty. That does not mean that it is cash in our bank as of today, but it will be collected at the very end of tax sale.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. Any other questions? Moved by Councillor Dunn. Support by Councillor Hammond. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? Motion carries. And on to the last report, again, Ms. Roach, borrowing bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is another very standard bylaw for council's consideration this evening. So Section 407 of the Municipal Act provides that a municipality may authorize temporary borrowing until property taxes and other revenues are collected in order to meet the current year's expenditures. So the Act also provides for maximum thresholds for a municipality to establish borrowing limits as outlined in the report. For several years, a borrowing request has been $20,000 and in the form of a line of credit. For the 2018 calendar year, the borrowing bylaw 8817 as proposed has set the borrowing request again at $20 million. Did I say 20,000 before? I meant 20 million, sorry. As soon as I said that, I said, that's very low. No lines of credits have been used in recent years to fund our current obligations. The municipality's monies are held in fully liquid bank accounts or investments. The preferred method of accessing the cash on a short-term basis, of course, which avoids the interest charges, is to use the funds held in our bank accounts. So there is no cost of having this line of credit available for use, but the municipality will incur interest charges should the funds be borrowed or the line be drawn on. So it is recommended that a bylaw to provide 2018 borrowing in the municipality of Leamington be presented to council for further consideration.
Thank you. Questions? Moved by Councillor Jacobs, support by Councillor Verbicki. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? Motion carries. Okay, thank you very much. So we have matters for approval. The Leamington Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee held July 26, looking for mover and seconder on this. Okay, well, did I have a mover and seconder first? Councillor Dunn and Councillor Hammond. And questions? Councillor, or Deputy Mayor.
I was rereading these minutes, and under new business, number 1, I found it quite interesting and perplexing. Why the members would be discussing possible restaurants to contact for Sip and Savor. Why would this be in their scope of things to do is beyond me. If someone could enlighten me, I would really appreciate that. But to me, it's like, what could they possibly have to do with that? Anyway, if someone answers it at some point in time is fine, but to me, this is ludicrous to have a committee, council or whatever, a committee doing that aspect of Sip and Savor.
That's the Heritage. I'm on the wrong report, so.
Yeah, it is the heritage. It's under
Yeah.
number 1, under new business.
Yep. Oh, I skipped over it. Okay. Councillor Dunn?
You, Your Worship. I can't speak to this specifically because that one meeting I wasn't at, but what they were talking about was they actually put up a display and we're contacting some of the getting older pictures of older restaurants and to help to support the history and the heritage of the older restaurants that were in place throughout our community at the time. Now, I don't know what further discussion went on at that particular meeting, but that's what, and Danielle and Olivia put together a great little display that was up at the Sip and Savor. Thank you.
I will take back my ludicrous word. Because that's fine. I read it as that they were going to be contacting the restaurants for the actual
Could see that,
Sip and Savor. So, no, that's fantastic. And I apologize to whoever's listening out there.
So I have a motion on the floor. Are there any questions in regard? Then all in favor of receiving those minutes? And carried. And we'll move on to the next one is the Leamington Accessibility Advisory Committee held October 25th. Looking for mover and seconder. Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Hammond. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? And carried. And finally, the Leamington Police Services Board meeting held October 25th. Moved by Councillor Jacobs, supported by Councillor Verbicki. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? And carried. There were no other matters for consideration, no closed session to report on, but we do have consideration of bylaws. Ms. Percy?
Bylaw 85-17 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Municipality of Leamington at its special meeting held November 22nd, 2017. Bylaw 86-17 being a bylaw to amend Schedule M of Bylaw 73-17, being a bylaw to impose fees and charges by the Corporation Municipality of Leamington. Council will recall that those are fees that arose from the passing of the business licensing bylaw at the last meeting. Bylaw 87-17 being a bylaw to provide for an interim tax levy and to provide for the payment of taxes. Bylaw 88-17 being a bylaw to authorize the borrowing of money to meet the current expenditures of the municipality. Bylaw 89-17 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Municipality of Leamington at its meeting held November 27, 2017.
Moved by Councillor Verbicki, supported by the Deputy Mayor. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? And carried. There were no notices of motion circulated, so we're in open session for council and admin. Councillor Verbicki.
This is your last chance to get soup and salad luncheon tickets. The advance price of $8. It is coming up on November the 29th, and we have over 30 soups available between 11 o'clock and 1:30 at the Portuguese Club. Please come out and support.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dunn.
Through you, Your Worship. I was in judging the Leamington Chamber Parade, Santa Claus Parade on Saturday, and it was a phenomenal turnout, but I just want to commend the chamber and all their volunteers and the whole crew and Santa himself. We can't go into that. But anyway, we had 57 floats last year and 60 this year, and the amount of effort and spirit that people put into their floats was amazing. So kudos to everybody involved. And I just also wanted to, since there won't be another council meeting, so I'll have to put my last plug out for the Giving Spoon at the bridge on the 9th and the 10th. Come on out and enjoy some soup for that. It's at the bridge of the old St. Joseph Catholic Church on Shirk Street. And all the proceeds will go to the bridge to help the youth in our community. So thank you. The youth.
Admin? Nothing from admin? All right, real quick for me then, because I know you've been sitting here for quite a while. Friday, November 17th, our CAO and I spent the better portion of a day with two representatives of the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, touring around the town, and yes, at the federal level, which is a rarity. We went north, and we went west. And very, very supportive comments coming from these two people who are working diligently on our behalf. And I'll leave it there. Wednesday, November 22nd, Lindsay Gammon, our communications officer, Danielle Truax, our planner, and myself were invited by a couple of the teachers at Leamington High School, grade 9 geography class, I think it was. And the students put on a wide array of suggestions, ideas, recommendations on what they would like to see happen in our town. It was more or less in regard to the CIP funding, but to be honest with you, it exploded into pretty much everything else you could imagine. And we took a mess of pictures that I don't know if Laura has uploaded them yet or not. I know I've got a bunch I've got yet to do, but it was really, I think the best part of it was to see the youth in our town so engaged in the future of this place. So, and some really great out of the box ideas, all of which we're trying to get sent into Ken Brown's hands so he can look at them all like he needs more work. But anyway, a big thank you out to the LDSS teachers that organized that and the students who participated. Thursday, November 23rd, our CAO and I spent the better part of the day again at the Ontario West Municipal Conference in London, and there we spoke I think quite closely with the the representative of the Ministry of Housing and Rural Affairs in regard to Leamington's current situation, and got some, again, rather strong feedback in that regard as well. And we attended the breakout sessions in the conferences, learned some new stuff about the OMB hearings, and some changes are coming there which are kind of cool. Saturday, November 25th in the afternoon, my wife and I were invited to represent council at the celebration of one of our local citizens who has been elevated to captain on Jazz Airlines. Her name is Captain Brooke DeBacker, and she's a Point Pelee Drive resident, and we've known her since she was a little kid, and mom and dad are pretty darn happy. And it was at the Pelee Trading Post, which I've never been inside, well, not since I was a little kid. And if you haven't been in there recently, you might want to go take a peek, because it's really cool what they've done there. And then finally, as Councillor Dunn alluded to, on the same Saturday night, it was the Christmas parade, and it was really good. We sat upstairs and just watched from the warmth of inside the town hall while Councillor Dunn sat out in the cold and judged the floats. But you know what? Not just a big thank you to the Chamber for organizing that, but a thank you to all the citizens and the businesses that put floats into that parade. It was really impressive. Very, very, very good. So very happy with it, and kudos to everybody. So that was it for me. So are there any statements of members non-debatable? Is there anybody willing to adjourn? Deputy Mayor and Councillor Verbicki. Discussion on that motion? All in favor? Carried.